So here we go. Let's get started by talking about shapes. Now, you may often hear the shape referred to as the quote-unquote cut. For example, you'll hear someone say a round cut or an emerald cut diamond. Now, that is different than the cut that is one of the 4 C's. That cut refers to the quality of the cutting that was done by the cutter for that shape. So just keep that in mind. In this section, if I use the term cut, I'm using it to refer to the shape. But later in this video or in this course, we'll be using the term cut to talk about the quality of the cutting that has been done, and therefore the brilliance and fire of the stone relative to other stones of the same shape. I hope that makes sense. Now, with that said, notice here that there are 10 standard diamond shapes that diamonds are typically cut to. Shown here first is the round shape, also known as brilliant cut. These are by far the most popular and usually have the most brilliance, which is to say they reflect back the most light out through the top of the stone compared to other shapes. Rounds also tend to be the most expensive because in order to achieve this shape, usually a larger amount of the rough stone has to be cut away than for other shapes. Next we have the cushion shape, also known as old mine or mine cut. These are either square or rectangular in shape, with rounded corners and a pillowy appearance, hence the name cushion. Moving to the right from the cushion is the radiant, also known as rectangular modified brilliant, because they are very close to the round cut, only in a square or a rectangle. The radiant is actually a rather new cut, having only been developed in the 1970s, and they're an excellent option if you like the shape of an emerald cut but the brilliance of a round. Next we have the Asher and the emerald shapes. Both of these are what is known as step cut shapes because they have fewer facets, and the facets they do have are in a stepped pattern. I forgot to mention earlier, but when you hear that term brilliant, like a round brilliant, brilliant cuts feature facets that are triangular and kite-shaped, as opposed to step cuts. What step cuts lack in brilliance, they make up for in what is known as fire, which is the intensity of the colored flashes that emanate from the diamond when exposed to light. Fire might also be referred to as sparkle, though like the GEMX lab, which rates quality of cut and whatnot, actually considers fire and sparkle to be kind of 2 different things. But think about brilliance as the amount of light reflected back out of the top of the stone when you're just holding it still. Think of fire as those flashes, if you will, of different colors as you sort of rotate the stone and look at it from different angles as light hits it from different angles. The Asher is a square shape with rounded corners, whereas the emerald shape is rectangular, also rounded corners, with a length to width ratio typically between 1.3 and 1.5. Now on the bottom row you'll see the princess shape, which is known as the square modified brilliant. Unlike the similar radiant cut, the princess cut has pointed rather than rounded corners and is almost always square or very close to square. The princess cut is considered the second most popular shape for engagement rings, with rounds being by far the most popular. Rounds by some estimates account for about 60% of engagement rings, maybe even as high as 70%. And supposedly diamonds account for something like, or princess cut diamonds account for something like 20%, maybe. Hard to believe it's that high. So I'm thinking it's probably more like 15 to 20%. Next you see the oval cut, which is just that. It's an oval. Brilliant faceting, usually with a length to width ratio between 1.3 and 1.5. Not unlike the length to width ratio of a typical emerald cut. Next to that, you see the marquee and pear cuts. The pear cut being like an oval with one pointed end, and the marquee with two pointed ends. Guidelines for the length to width for these are about 1.4 to 1.7 for the pear shape, and somewhere between 1.75 and 2.15 length to width for the even more elongated marquee shape. Lastly, we have the heart shape, which is, of course, in the shape of a heart. These should have a length to width ratio as close to 1 as possible, though anything from 0.9 to 1.1 is probably acceptable. All of these shapes on the bottom row you can see are derivations of the brilliant round shape. So they are likewise going to give off plenty of brilliance, but lack the fire that you will see in an emerald or Asher cut. Shape, of course, is a matter of taste, but I would say deciding on shape early on in the process is probably most important, as it will help you narrow down your choices considerably. And it's just really difficult to compare diamonds of different shapes to each other to say which one is better or worse. Personally, I have a preference for the square and rectangular shapes on the top row, the cushions, radiants, ashers, and emeralds. They're much less common than rounds, and I think give a more sophisticated and elegant look than the other shapes. Again, that's just my preference, and if you want to agree or disagree in the comments, please feel free to do so.